and that's focusing on the demeanor of classroom interactions. And then there's for social justice, and that's using mathematics as a tool to be used to challenge the status quo, right? So those are kind of the three perspectives that they're looking at, social justice and mathematics. And then TOTOS Mathematics for All, which is an organization that's really focusing on the needs of second language learners in mathematics, as well as the National Council of Supervisors of Mathematics, wrote a joint position statement on mathematics education through the lens of social justice, and there's the link if you're interested in reading that document for yourself. But a quote from that paper, and we're going to spend the bulk of our time really addressing this particular. It says the social justice stance requires a systemic approach that includes fair and equitable teaching practices, high expectations for all students, access to rich, rigorous, and relevant mathematics, strong family, community relationships, positive mathematics learning and achievement. Equally important, the social justice stance interrogates and challenges the roles of power, privilege, and oppression played in the current unjust system of mathematics education society. All right, so we're looking at holistic. So, what is social justice in mathematics education? Again, this is from the perspective of the joint position statement. And they looked at four different aspects, and the first one is eliminating deficit views in mathematics learning. So that's things like using standardized tests to label students as maladaptive or immature, ignoring the math knowledge and experiences that children engage in outside of school. It's also eradicating mathematics as a gatekeeper. So eliminating things like ability grouping, tracking, course-taking patterns that lead some students to college and career and others to getting pathways. And access to high-level cognitively demanding tasks within a mathematics course, because for some students who don't get a chance to engage in high-level cognitive. And then it's engaging in the socio-political turn of mathematics education. So that's things like using mathematics as a tool to understand and critique the world. An openness to multiple meanings and practices that students bring to the classroom. And viewing mathematics as a more dynamic, humanistic, and just. And then the last aspect of social justice in mathematics that the joint position statement talks about is elevating the professional learning of mathematics teachers and leaders with a dual focus on mathematics and social justice. So they're talking about teachers needing professional learning that focuses on pedagogies that are equitable and culturally responsive. That pre-service and in-service teachers should reflect an explicit anti-deficit discourse approach, and that professional learning should connect mathematics, children's mathematical thinking, and community-based funds of knowledge into instruction. So those are the four elements of social justice and mathematics. And so then the joint position statement goes on to talk about specific steps for implementing social justice in mathematics education. And the first step is acknowledging that there's a problem. So I'm going to share some data with you. These are the percent of California 11th grade students who met or exceeded the standards in mathematics on the Smarter Balanced Assessment in 2018. And if you notice, the data is disaggregated by race. I guess it doesn't show up on the screen. So it's disaggregated by race, and then within each racial and ethnic group, it's disaggregated by economically disadvantaged and not economically disadvantaged. So turn to a partner and talk about what do you notice and what do you wonder about these data. notice?
The ones that do best are the races that get better opportunities and are not economically disadvantaged. The ones that do worse are those that have both African American and Latin and their economic disadvantaged. Yeah, there's just two hurdles to go through for each student.
Okay, so what do you notice and what do you wonder about these data?
It shows the stereotypes that of people who are supposed to be good at math. It shows it right there. Asians are supposed to be good at math.
And so I'm always ambivalent about sharing data like these because one of the things I don't want to do is reinforce stereotypes, but it's important to again acknowledge that something's going on here that we need to address. Rochelle Gutierrez really admonishes us to not just gap gaze because we often just look at the gaps and talk about them, but we never do to really change them and make them consistent over time. What else do you notice and what do you wonder? Yes.
If you're not economically disadvantaged, why are these numbers so much different between race? It should be on this, it should be level. It should be level.
So you're saying if they're not economically disadvantaged, then the score should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, the yellows should be.
We talked a little bit about, you brought up that, wonder what non-tracking math class would look like, because they're tracked in middle school. So what were these students like in the 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th grade, before this?
So you wonder what their achievement looked like prior to this. Noticing one. Yes.
One of the big notices we said is, regardless of race, economic disadvantage is always lower. So it didn't matter where you came in race-wise. If you are economically disadvantaged, you're already behind. Yeah, you're at a disadvantage. That was huge for me as far as just trying to think, like, if I had one thing to hit as many kids as possible, you could just help the economic disadvantage. You're going to help everyone across the board then.
Yes, Chris.
And just to tag on what John said, it looks like it's roughly the same effect rate.
That gap seems about the same for every
Population, so it seems like economics is terribly important.
So that's statewide data. These are national data. This is from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the scale score, and again by race from 2005 to 2015. Now, ordinarily they give the NAEP every 4 years, but for some reason, I guess they gave it between 2013 and 2015 in a 2-year. What do you notice or wonder these days? Anything different than previous?
Some of the colors.
Yeah. Can you see the colors?
We
detail
realize that the middle line, the grayish one.
is all students, right? This is all students, Black, Hispanic, white, and Asian. So, and that's how the people who administer the test classify. So, any additional noticings or wonderings?
It's interesting how much the Asian jumped from 2005 to 2009, but then it tapered down.
I wonder why. All right, so, I share these data often with different groups of people, and what we still hear people say when we get to the why is, well, it's the poor, the parents' fault, they don't know the language, can't do math, because there's no books in the home, there's a violence and crime in their community, so they come to school hungry. Some students really don't need college. Right, pervasive low achievement, that's just the way it is. Always seems to be about the students and their families. Other factors. So the joint position statement, again, talks about specific action that schools and teachers can take to help implement social justice. First one is around, first set of actions is around belief systems and structure. And so one thing that we often do is refrain from deficit discourse and rejection. We all know how, we're in the lounge or in a faculty meeting, and how you start, conversations start popping up about specific groups of students. That one of the things that we can't stop other people from making statements, but we ourselves can agree to refrain from engaging. That's an action. Eliminating traffic. Not as easy, right? That one's a little bit more difficult, but we know there are examples of schools that have done it. San Francisco Unified School has been on a several-year journey of tracking, eliminating acceleration, and it's been a challenge, but it's something that they're dedicated to because they know that tracking leads to racialized outcomes. Changing course taking patterns to make sure that all students are on a course pathway that will lead to positive career or college outcomes. Reducing or eliminating remedial courses and creating fair assessment systems. And so, how many of you have ever seen the documentary Immersion? So, this is a short film, it's about 12 minutes long. And as you're looking at this video, I want you to think about, how does this story connect to you? What are the belief systems and structures that contributed to Moise's success and or failures? And how is Moise's story reflected in mathematics education to social? So I'm gonna have to switch over to the videos.
Tired of pretzels, mountain, Pop-Tarts, toaster, 8th Street? Introducing Pop-Tarts.
So let's go back to the questions that I asked you to think about before we get started. So turn to somebody near you and talk about, one, how does the story connect to you? What are some of the belief systems and structures that contributed to Moise's success and or failures? How is Moise's story reflective of mathematics?
It's rough, but like, still against the law. And
A little bit.
I feel like having to it's just right to try to follow what's already in place and not there's two people coming in. But like, I also have personal stuff, like I have family members who fit that and stuff. It's like it's always a difficult issue to figure out exactly where the line should be and how much we should do to help them learn their best.
So,
Frustrating.
All right, so how would you respond to any of these questions? What did you talk about in your paper? Yes.
I have a student this year that's strictly Chinese speaking, and so I'm sure she goes through much frustration. Math is something that she should be using, but the word called.
We talked about the characters. The boy was obviously very intelligent, working hard, wanted to learn. A teacher who wanted to support the student but didn't have the resources or the support to do that. And so for the third question, we mentioned that there's really a systemic problem that needs to be addressed.
I think also the third one kind of shows the statistics. One of those, is Hispanic people, and that could be, it's not that they can't do it.
Any other response?
We talked a little bit about the idea of, focus on those who are nearest to the plan to do that. But the rest is left be. As a teacher, that cuts down deep because like every child deserves that education.
But that's a common strategy between your students. Use a target that, a lot of, I hear the term goal, students that are really close their own things. Right, so so part of this is just to show the complexity that's involved in some of the data that we looked at earlier, that it's not, people want to come up with very kind of simplistic solutions to these problems that are very complex, right? And there are systems, and can anybody maybe call out some of the systems that were in place? I've heard you mention some of them, but what are some of the systemic issues? A challenge for places.
There's the concept of, single language immersion that is being forced into the belief that throwing them into the deep end and making them operating in English-only sort of setting will be to provide for him impetus to make him want to learn. Whatever that sort of bootstrap kind of mentality that seems to, that's still pervasive in California schools. We have a system that does not value bilingual education at all.
In some cases, you'll see, dual immersion programs, but kind of the irony there is usually more affluent.
Right? They're there to teach kids French.
I think the idea too of academic vocabulary, he's thinking a block that is on the shelf.
Right.
They're talking about something different. It's that idea of there's no connection to this. Multiple meaning words in English are basic.
Yeah, it seems like there's a system that treats mathematics as a culturally neutral subject that is sort of devoid of these sort of cultural, that we know are culturally embedded practices, and nobody ever really tries to find out what Moises knows and what his experiences are, how he uses mathematics in everyday experience.
Talk about the testing structure itself and the pressure that puts on the teacher, and you have to cover up content.
Yeah.
Take away tools, or else she could lose her job.
Right. Yeah. So Paul's comments were a perfect segue into the next action item, which is around curriculum and instruction. And so the joint position feels that curriculum instruction should cultivate positive math ideas. And I would argue that the current system of mathematics education doesn't develop positive mathematics ideas. If anything, it tends to kind of destroy math ideas. That it should involve student collaboration and discourse. That, again, students should be able to engage in high-level cognitively demanding tasks, not low-level skills. And that the curriculum should be culturally relevant and responsive. So in the book that came out a couple of years ago by NCT and the Impact of Identity on K-8 Mathematics, they described 5 equity-based teaching practices that teachers can engage in. Student identity, positive student identity. So they're going deep with the mathematics, leveraging multiple mathematical competencies, forming mathematics, learners' identities, challenging spatial knowledge, and drawing on multiple resources of knowledge. So we'll go through each one. The first one is going deep with the mathematics. And again, this issue around high-level cognitively demanding tasks, because again, I would argue that part of that disparity that we see in the score is who gets access to high-level demonstration of multiple strategies and representation, right? And so we talk about this whole idea of the fourfold way that students should be expressed the solution to problems in words, numbers, symbols, and pictures. And that going deep should involve analysis and justification. So if you're just giving students rote memorization or skill-based problems, there's really not a lot of room for analysis and justification. You really have to have a rich text. Then another equity-based practice is leveraging multiple competencies. And so in collaboration that uses varying math knowledge to solve complex problems. Tasks with multiple entry points, so no matter where you are, you can enter into the problem and using assessments and practices such as examining patterns, generalizing, abstracting, making comparisons and specifying. Those should be the kinds of tasks that students are. And then affirming mathematical learners' identities. Right? So promoting persistence and reasoning with complex problem-solving tasks. The only way students are going to get good at solving complex tasks is to engage in complex tasks. They're never going to get there if all we're engaging in is low-level skills. Validate the math knowledge and experiences as math learners. Don't assume that students are coming to the class with no mathematical knowledge. They engage in mathematics in lots of different ways in their regular lives, whether it's the games that they play or the different kinds of activities they're engaging with their families that we need to be able to take advantage of so to help them access the mathematics. And then the kind of feedback that we give, right? Focuses on ideas and strategies, right? As opposed to mistakes and errors. So what is correct and incorrect about the work that they did, and what are some productive or unproductive strategies? So oftentimes in math class, you used to get these tests back with big red X's or C's, right? With no real feedback, moving forward or from challenging spaces of marginality, right? So positioning these students as mathematical resources. Again, coming to the classroom with knowledge that help them on mathematics. Distributing math authority as interconnected among the students, the teacher, and the text. So the teacher isn't the sole mathematical authority figure. And then encouraging student-to-student. And then lastly, drawing on multiple resources of knowledge. Math, culture, language. So tasks that involve stories and situations to solve or represent a problem as opposed to what we call just naked number problem. Like there's a page full of one-step equations to solve that aren't any kind of using previous knowledge as a bridge to new learning. Tapping the math knowledge and experiences related to students' culture, community, family, and history resources. Recognizing and strengthening multiple language forms and affirming and supporting multiple. So we're going to take a look at a mathematical task and see whether or not it kind of conforms to these different equity-based teaching practices. So I'm going to start just with this idea of what is a fair share. So what is a fair share from a math standpoint? What's fair share from a social standpoint? What might be some examples to district? Talk to somebody.
It's definite. Yeah. I guess from a social standpoint, it could be two ways. Like, it could be quantitative, a fair share, or like everybody gets equal, no matter what the circumstance. What's fair share from a math standpoint?
Like, distribute half the handbook.
So equal amounts. Ready? Want to share anything else? Proportional reasoning. Okay, so everyone gets proportional. What about from a social standpoint? Right, gets what they need.
Well, it could be two ways. It could be equality, which is more the mathematical way, or it could be equity. You're talking about there's equity versus equality, and the social standpoint that we're focused on today is more equity, so that everybody gets what they need, depending on what their circumstances are.
All right, so we're going to take a look at this. And it's called Poppy's 70th birthday. This is a true story. If we had more time, I would use the 3 strategies, but I'll just read through it. And, well, you have an opportunity to kind of play around. So, Poppy's 70th birthday true story. He was senior at Julia's 70th birthday. 3 children wanted to throw him a big party to celebrate. The hall rental, mariachi, food, and decorations cost $1,000. The brother, a special medical doctor, anesthesiologist, makes about $20,000 per month. That's good. 3 children split the cost. One of the sisters, a university professor, makes about $6,000 per month, said I know. She suggested the following. The brother pays $3,150. You pay $9,000. Targeting the family business and single mom and single women. It's about $3,000 paid for. So have a conversation with the people around you about this scenario and think about what are some mathematical questions I could ask about this scenario. Okay?
It's percentage. The sisters, like, percentage. Depending on the
Don't solve it just yet. I'm asking you to solve it. Play around with the numbers.
I didn't do the math. Yeah, I'm just saying that, yeah, the brother's paying the most because he has the greatest income. And then the sister is less, and then the other sister has a smaller income. But yeah, it doesn't really fair because now it's not. Yeah, it's more fair. Whereas if they split it, then that would be not so.
Okay, so again, not asking for any solution or anything right now, but what are some mathematical questions we could ask about this scenario? So what percentage are they paying for their monthly income for either one of those scenarios?
Yeah.
Is it proportional? Proportional to for both scenarios? Any other mathematical questions we could ask about this?
Is the division of cost equal the total cost?
Does the division of cost in both scenarios?
Yeah. I don't know.
So here's what I want you to.
So that's why it's my question.
It's a task, and work on this with someone. We don't have a lot of time, but just kind of. So you're going to write a position statement using mathematical evidence, right, like proportions, ratios, percent, to support your conclusion to the following question. Which person do you agree with and why? What is fair in the situation? Can you think of an alternative financial arrangement that might be better? Yeah. I mean, we have more time, I pass out chart paper and do all that because I asked to include some kind of visual representation, but I know we might have a lot. So play around with it and see if you can come up with some answers to some of these questions and justify using that.
Yeah, can we see the numbers again?
Sure, yeah.
Yes, that too. Like it didn't take into It mentions it, but the amount is still fully applicable with that information.
So you just put it in. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking as meetings out of but yeah, I really think yeah, I think that's
All right, so I know that wasn't a lot of time, and maybe you didn't come to a complete solution, but anybody have any ideas they want to share in terms of who you agree with, what you think is fair, or if there might be an alternative arrangement? Might be better. Yes.
I mean, if I'm we're at a party, I'm gonna pay for it, hey, you want to make donations? Great.
So you have an alternative.
That's my alternative. That's how I would do something like that.
So you're saying the brother,
Whoever's organizing it, then say, okay, this is what I'm gonna vote, this is what I'm gonna vote for. If I get it up, great. If I can't, great. So, knowing that I might end up doing it by myself. I would pay $4,500 for part of it. Cheap, if I'm good enough for me to use it, I'm happy. That is not $4,500.
so did you discover anything by looking at the numbers in terms of?
Yeah, naturally, you mentioned the numbers in 5%, others 16% in terms of course.
In which scenario are you referring
In the second scenario.
The sister scenario? Okay.
So they were all close to about 15%, 16.8. It was just funny, because that's just my view of how I would handle it. I'm working as a party and they were.
How many of you had it? Is this a familiar scenario? Party groups. Any other solution?
I thought about for an alternative financial, like, what can you afford? That sister, maybe it's $3,000 a year. So the mom, if you don't, you won't be able to afford it. So,
So you do an alternative based upon what you can afford, which is kind of similar to what you're talking about.
yeah.
Okay.
So my family usually does like, hey, you take care of this part, you take care of this part, and then whatever price you come up with, that's what you're gonna pay. You know?
So you don't start off with the amount, you say, oh, this is what I can afford and whatever I can afford.
whatever band shows up. You'll ask your family like, hey, this is what I'm getting. Like, okay, want something different, give me some money, I'll get a better band or whatever. Or a secret hall.
My thought was like hers was, but like, if the single mom can only afford $450, then everybody should pay $450 and do the party for that price instead of like. That's what my family does. It's like, okay, we agree on, okay, what price do we want to do? Like individually, okay, like let's do the total for that. Like
So you're kind of agreeing with the brother that everybody should pay the same amount,
yeah,
but you're saying it should be what's affordable for the person who can
everybody.
afford the least.
Yeah. And then kind of going on with that, my family sometimes says, okay, that's the baseline, and then anybody who can pay more and wants to, okay, you volunteer that much money and it'll contribute to it. So that's another addition.
I saw a hand over here.
Yeah, so mine's kind of in between, and this is actually a true story for me. A brother who makes a little bit more, was going to party for my dad, and he wanted to do this. We said, hey, we're willing to do, and that's why the taco truck came up. We're willing to pay for the taco truck. If you want to do that, here's our cost for what we all said we're okay to do, and then if you want to go above and beyond for this part, but like, here's what we agree that we can all pay. And then if you want to do something above and beyond because you have more means than the rest of us in our budget, like we're okay with that. Like here's what we're committing to. So we always start of like, hey, here's what we're willing to, here's what we can afford. Knowing that we all come from different backgrounds and needing the money, and so then we figure out, okay, now we have this pool of money. What kind of party can we throw based on this amount instead of starting here now? People get guilted into either the brother, because some of it is like that is maybe the brother wasn't the one who wanted to do the $4,500 party, but if it was a sister who only makes $3,000, she wanted to do this little party, but then she can't afford it, so then now it's putting the pressure on that one who can, because it just assumed that, oh, you have the money, so you're going to pay for it as well. So there's a lot of assumptions of who starts that discussion and who's assuming someone else is going to pay.
Chris?
I find it interesting that almost nobody really likes either one of these.
Yeah.
Right? And so when we're looking at a problem that may in fact no longer be authentic at all, right? The authentic solution to this sort of problem lies in some other set of values than the hybridized and homogenized that are forced into these two choices.
Well, and there is an option of, right, coming up with your own,
right,
an alternative financial, right? So that
right.
is an option. Yes.
And I was noticing just where that other value comes from is coming from the bunch of dollars that people we're bringing our own math and our own experiences to it.
Absolutely. So I've done this task multiple times. So these are some of the different analyses. And so this person looked at, okay, if it's scenario A, what percentage of the monthly income is each person paying? And then looking at the sister scenario, what percentage of the monthly income they're working on a third scenario. This one also is looking at, so they took everyone's salary and looked at what percentage of the total, so 70%, the brother makes like 70% of their collective, and the professor and the sister, and then they kind of use that to come up with some alternative, they came up with some alternative solutions as well. And then again, here's another one, right, they're looking at the sister's scenario, and then here's some alternative, the brother fronts money for the sister so she can pay him back. Right, the sister too has the option to contribute things other than money. Right? And then here's some different visual representations, right? So the whole amount, what the total of all their monthly incomes are, and then they kind of use that to set up some percentages. Now you see, like, you all noticed that the brother's amount wasn't quite that 15%. Why do you think that it was rounded off to 31%?
it was 15%.
Right, and also this is a task that was designed for middle school students, and so it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Those are all similar to some of the solutions. So let me finish with a few, one other action item that they talk about in the social justice position statement, partnering with families and community resources. And so that requires learning about the knowledge, practices, and experience of the community. Not assuming that there's nothing there that you can do. That takes effort on the teacher to find that out. And then creating respectful bi-directional feedback pathways. Oftentimes, schools have very prescriptive ways that they want parents to participate and become supervising. But we're saying we need to bring parents in a lot more into helping to inform the curriculum, to be a lot more engaged with the instructional process. And then lastly, there's accountability, right? So it's important to create professional learning opportunities and accountabilities that monitor the progress and implementation of the action. And then conducting regular audits on implementation and the progress of social and making informed adjustments to pressure. So I'll end with a quote from a brand new book, Colloquium, by Francis Sue, and he states that those who pursue justice in mathematics focus and so here are some of the resources that I've drawn on for this presentation. This book, Rethinking Mathematics, has a lot of the activity problems work that comes out of that book. We have a number of different lessons that are designed to driving while black and brown comes out of that book. So it's got a lot of good resources. And I also refer to the book about the impact of mathematics. And then the last thing is Todos is going to be giving a conference in June in Scottsdale, Arizona. Don't worry, it's July. So it's definitely equity for a small conference, about maybe 200 people, equity folks. So I encourage you to check it out if you have the content. And there's my contact information. And so with that, I will question.
Are there other countries dealing with this inequality with multiple races when it comes to testing? Like the method graphic?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Some of the European Union, the UK especially, is dealing with, they're addressing it in a more aggressive manner than they were in the past, largely because they've become such a multicultural nation. But there are other places that are fairly along with it culturally,
right,
that are not aggressive. Canada's really struggling with this, and I shouldn't say struggling, addressing this profoundly, and the European, and a good chunk of the European Union is moving in this direction.
I have noticed, I've even said it to my students, I feel 50% English teacher, language teacher, 50%. It's frustrating to me because I came into this field of math, so it's been a humbling experience to kind of take a step back and like, you know what, this is frustrating to understand language, but you can't even get to math if you don't even understand it. And they write prefix in words for part of the complex and the cash stuff. Words. It's frustrating.
And I mean, they're going to be expected, you know, it's pretty constructive response items. There's a lot of reading and writing, so now it's impossible to escape that you can have reading and writing, so you can have language arts problems. Find out what are some of the strategies that they use. Way around that.
And it's even thinking about our students, it's like, there is this, you know, if they had that test in Spanish, you would have, these and numbers, and you need to.
What are some of the barriers to teaching?
Not explicitly in the curriculum. Because math is easier. You know, the teacher's not being in this, so much is covered for that big test.
Yeah, going off that, Amanda was saying, just work with the quotes unified.
Yeah, the whole district is the same test time. So like you break basic and you're slowing it down. You're gonna get in trouble.
What grade level do you teach? Because you talked about that driving while black and brown activity. That's a probability. Probability. I know it's a 7th grade standard. I'm not sure where in the high school curriculum it's covered. But if you have to do a probability simulation, you might not do that as opposed to the other. Right. So I mean, part of it is thinking about where does the task match the standards or the content that you have to teach. You can't take the place of another lesson. It's sort of the same instruction. Yes.
I also think people are uncomfortable talking about issues of race and questions, and I'm very difficult with that.
That's why it's right, and that I think is one of the biggest barriers, right? The comfort level of the teacher dealing with some of these issues, and so that's why I think it's really important to have those connections with the community, right? So that they understand what they're doing and might be
whether it is teaching the socially active grade, does it require talking about it? Can it just be a way of being and a way of instructing? Or does it require specific conversation?
I think it depends on what your goal is, right? And so I think that, like I say, you know, I've seen such poor instruction in some schools that I've been into that I think really good traditional instruction would be a big step forward, much less getting into some of the more collaborative ways that we're talking about. So I think it's context driven, but first is making sure that they're getting good mathematics instruction. Some of these social justice tasks are like icing on the cake, right? First, I want to make sure getting attached, not practice, not. And I think there's room Where you can fit these in is students are supposed to be doing mathematical modeling, particularly at the high school. And the statistics and probability standards, you can analyze data about anything. Analyze data about important social issues. And depending on where you're teaching, students are dealing with these issues in their daily lives on a regular basis. So why not show them that mathematics is a tool that they can use to help solve?
Recently, went to training in New York and I got to go into one class. And the books they were reading are about the life they're living on the outside. So there has to be a way that we connect their experiences with the math.
So that's taking the time to get to know the students and know what their experiences are and what makes sense to them.
I also think that data literacy is kind of a missing piece in all of this, especially for elementary teachers, you know, that there's not a whole lot of preparation for that in undergraduate and teaching programs so that they feel comfortable engaging in this rich mathematics that it takes to become something that it takes to do social justice class.
Chris and I were at a meeting a week ago at Stanford.
We can go today.
Yeah, and focusing on data science, which is one of the biggest growing fields. Right? Professionally, every major corporation and organization analyzes big data. And so we're really trying to see what we can do to incorporate data science throughout the curriculum. Because data science is the marriage of statistics and computer science, right? And so we're really trying to see what we can do to make it a lot more accessible, make it as viable a pathway as the calculus track, right? So that's, and I think it also lends itself to studying Jesus.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for this interactive time that we've been able to share. I hope that for everyone here, this has either confirmed things that you already have thought, perhaps challenged you to think outside your comfort zone into some of those courageous zone areas, to think about the kind of conversations and lessons that you can have in your classroom, as well as the conversations you can have with your colleagues at your school sites, to think together about how you might begin to take on some of the issues of social justice, both in your teaching, but also in the kinds of tasks and learning opportunities that students are provided. So we'll keep talking about this. Our next colloquium, our very own Angela Joseph and Candy Reimer will be presenting on some specific further steps you can take in classroom practices to promote social justice mathematics. And then in April, Judy Moskovich will be talking about discourse practices in the classroom that can be utilized to promote equity in mathematics education as well. So hope you can join us for those. We'll say good night and look forward to seeing you next time.
This one was yeah, that was one of the things that and the